when they always ask me, do you need a screen, do you need this, I say I need only two things, water and a sound system that works, and I usually get the water. It's true. I don't quite understand why that's the case. Why is there such sound system problems all over America in universities? How do we perceive social reality? What is objectivity? And in this age of empire, how do we arrive at the truth? It's okay, just to get the hum out of it, and that would be great. Can't go that. This is a sound system that's older. It's older than Franklin Roosevelt. Imperialism is not only the process, it's the political, economic content. Imperialism is when the ruling interests of one country expropriate the land, the labor, the natural resources, and the capital and the markets of another country. Imperialism means plunder and tribute. Empires are not just all about power. It's not power for power's sake. Nobody goes out and just goes and does power. Oh, let's go to Africa and conquer chunks of Africa because then we'll feel more powerful, you know. You go to Africa because there's something there that you want. It's one of the richest places in the world. That's where you got, I mean, tin, copper, diamonds, gold, hemp, timber, human beings, slaves, all the stuff that enriches you. That's what King Leopold, he didn't have any grudge about the people in the Congo. He didn't care one way or another about who they were, where they were, whether they lived or died. He just wanted them and work them in those mines so that he could get richer and richer and richer. So it's not power for power's sake. It's power to get your wealth, and using your wealth to increase your power, and using your power to maximize and secure your wealth. That's what it's about. That's what the guys who are in the White House today are doing. So, it's plunder, it's tribute, it's these rich resources, it's expropriating the land, the crops, the cheap labor. Empires are enormously profitable, mostly for the ruling and investing class of the imperial country. Empires are enormously costly for the common populace, both of the targeted country and of the imperial country itself. The empire feeds off the republic's resources. Where the hell do you think this empire comes from? It comes from the republic. Where do they get these? Where do they get the money for these 380 military bases and these bombings and killings and shootings and destruction? They get it from our tax dollars. The people pay the taxes and do without essentials so that the patricians can pursue their far-off plunder. The center is bled so that the perimeter can expand and expand and expand. And you see that happening. We live in a country that has a runaway defense budget just this past year, $487 billion. That's just the basic Pentagon defense budget. It doesn't count another $124 billion for Iraq, another $30 or $40 billion for Afghanistan. And at home, what do we have? We've got public hospitals closing. We've got libraries cutting back their hours. We got goddamn sound systems that don't even work. Now you know why I'm angry. We got conservation programs being cut. We got Medicare under siege because we can't afford it. And we can't afford it. Where are we going to get all that money from? I got to work on my George Bush imitation, I know. We got education funding being cut back. What they do in the world, U.S. rulers, they do on purpose. They know what they're doing. Just because they mislead you and confuse you or us doesn't mean that they are necessarily confused. They may say all sorts of misleading things. A political writer, Lawrence McGuire, he sent me his article. I wrote a piece Maybe I should tell you about this. Am I going too long? You want me to stop now? Other people have spoken. All right. I wrote an article, and you can, it's not on my website, but Common Dreams has it posted. It's called Mystery: How Wealth Creates Poverty in the World. And I pointed out that as U.S. investment has increased over the last half century dramatically in the third world, and U.S. and IMF and World Bank loans have increased in the third world, and U.S. aid to the third world has increased. While all of this has gone on for half a century, during that half a century, poverty has increased. Today, the number of people living in poverty is growing at a faster rate than the world's population. So as wealth accumulates, poverty spreads, because there's a dynamic interrelation between the two. And I said, so here's the mystery. Why is that a mystery? It's such a conundrum. How do we figure this out? Well, there's no mystery, really. Unless you assume that these investors and these aid people and these bankers manipulating this debt are doing all this to help the people in these countries. If you drop that assumption and you say they're doing it to help themselves, then it's a perfectly rational system. They're making tremendous amounts of money. These investments aren't designed to uplift the people, to build up their domestic industries, to give them a viable economy, to make their food supply secure, and those things. These investments are there to get them off the land, to take the wealth out of them, to reduce the price of their labor down to shantytown starvation levels. And so is the aid. The aid, all these countries have to buy it from the U.S., and so with the debt, the loans are sent in, and then they're trapped in the loan, and then they're hit with more money sent to them, and they're forced to do SAPs, it's called SAPs, Structural Adjustment Programs, which means cut back on all your own domestic subsidies and development and all that. So these programs are designed to impoverish these people, and they've been very successful. And the liberal critic comes along and says, this isn't working, because he's smarter. He's so much smarter than all these people who've been doing this all this while. No, he isn't. He's the dumbest one in the room. He always thinks that American foreign policy is so stupid and so confused, and our dealings with these countries are off on a wrong leg and all that. Why? Well, Larry McGuire writes to me, he says, I loved your article, and it answered the question that I posed in mine. And I wish I could just read his piece, because I liked his piece. I wrote him back. But he was trying to understand international finance and what happened in Argentina. And he read three liberal writers. He read Mark Cooper of The Nation. Mark Cooper, who never met a U.S. war he didn't love and support, and he supported the destruction of Yugoslavia, a viable social democracy. He supported the Gulf War. He supports this war in Iraq right now. Mark Weisbrot and Paul Krugman of the New York Times. All three of them writing about Argentina. And McGuire, with feigned innocence, he notes that all three said that Argentina had been a gold mine for international investors and big speculators, a source of huge profits. You remember when Argentina crashed, when the whole economy went into a burnout. It just went down some years ago. This is what we're talking about. The IMF forced Argentina to slash its protective tariffs, privatize its state enterprises, and transfer huge sums from Argentine taxpayers to the pockets of the big money people and the IMF. McGuire, he notes that Cooper, Weisbrot, and Krugman condemned the crisis in Argentina, that these three say that the IMF, and these are various quotes, created a failed model, the program was an error, a catastrophic failure, a failed experiment, a disaster. But McGuire says, how so? Agreed it was a disaster for the Argentinians and for Argentina. But the free market IMF policies made Wall Street cheer, as Krugman himself said, and it reaped billions for investors. In other words, the policy worked very well for a small group of very wealthy people. Isn't that what the policy was supposed to do, McGuire asks? The IMF has pursued these same policies in many other countries. If an institution does the same thing over and over again with profitable results, why is it a failure? Because it brought hardship to the people of these countries? What's that got to do with getting rich? As McGuire says, I quote him, "I would call it a well-crafted policy that must work for the people implementing that policy. Otherwise, why would they continue doing it? What's experimental about it? It's been done. They've been doing it for 40 years. What do you mean? Krugman called it an experimental policy that's gone wrong. We've got to stop it." So why do Cooper, Weisbrot, and Krugman call it a failure? I'm going to tell you why right now. This is why you paid your $10. Now's the moment. You're going to hear the real lowdown. What was the question again? Why do they call it a failure? They call it a failure because they want to stay within the dominant paradigm. They prefer to make a liberal complaint rather than a radical analysis. They assume a community of interest between the plutocratic investors and the working people of the recipient countries, when in fact there is no community of interest between those two. These three have no class analysis of the IMF. They assume that the rich plunderers who make billions off the IMF are primarily interested in helping others rather than in helping themselves. They avoid all mention of that old Roman question, cui bono. That's Latin. It means what? Who benefits? That's right. Who's getting it? Whose benefit? This is being done because somebody is benefiting it in most cases. Now the same for the war in Iraq. That the reasons given by the administration to justify that war, weapons of mass destruction, Al-Qaeda links to Hussein, that these reasons have proven false, doesn't mean that the policy is imbecilic. As I said to you already, because our rulers try to mislead us and confuse us, doesn't mean that they themselves are confused. The war in Iraq, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, the war in Iraq is not a stupid blunder. It's not a well-intentioned undertaking that went wrong. Iraq has been very good for a number of interests. It served notice to the Middle East and the world that countries that chart an independent, self-defining, self-developing course will be destroyed. That's just what Cheney said yesterday on that aircraft carrier about Iran, that it might try to emerge as a regional power, and we've got to make sure that doesn't happen. There are really very disturbing things about Iran. You know, you have a new literacy rate of up to 80%, the social wages being built up, they're recycling oil profits right back into the economy in some cases. Many, many things wrong with Iran, especially with the condition of women. I'm not trying to say that's a society we should aspire for. But what bothers them is that here's a country that's charting an independent course. It's not putting itself under the free market global system. And that's what was wrong with Iraq. Saddam Hussein, and here's something, if you want to look at amnesia in the media, Saddam Hussein was Washington's poster boy years ago. The Iraqi people had a revolution in 1958, and they kicked out the British and American oil companies, and they built a democratic country. Every time they talk about we've got to go in there and teach the Iraqis democracy, there's a lie. There's the lie of omission. They forget that they had a democracy. They had a constitutional government, a prime minister. Saddam Hussein's first gig with the CIA was to shoot the prime minister, which he did. He didn't kill him. We just wounded him, and the CIA got him out and brought him to Syria. He later on worked his way in, and with his death squads, he killed, or he drove into exile, or he drove underground every constitutionalist, every progressive, every reformer, every Democrat, every communist in the country who had formed this coalition. He even then killed and slaughtered and murdered the whole left wing of his own Ba'athist party. This is the part they never tell you about Saddam Hussein. And then when he was doing that, he was Washington's poster boy. They loved him. They gave him aid. They gave him a good chunk of the oil market. They gave him. They sigged him on Iran to go fight, do a proxy war for them against Iran. He was everything. But then he started committing economic nationalism. He kept the economy state-owned. He trained cadres of engineers. He did not turn Iraq into a free market client state. He did not open it up to global international investment. He did not say, come on in, boys, it's all yours. The land, the labor, the resources, the oil, everything. It's all yours. Just give me and my brother Jose or Abdul, whatever part of the country it is, the client leader will say, just give me and my brother Pierre a payoff and all that, and we'll take care and keep the people in line for you. He didn't do that. He was a right-winger conservative, but he did keep a lot of these social programs anyway. That didn't fit very well. Iraq was the example. It was a bad example for the Middle East. It was the example, the danger of a good example. We call it that. If every country in the Middle East starts doing that, or in the world, what happens to the empire? What happens to our free market global system of earning billions and billions and billions of dollars off the sweat, labor, and land and resources of these people? So that was accomplished. You see, this war did accomplish something. It took an independent, self-defining, self-developing country and destroyed it. Making the world that much safer for the free market global empire. If you want to know what kind of empire the U.S. has, it's a free market empire. Iraq was good for other people. 100 companies made billions in government contracts. Most of them are getting out now because the situation is becoming so untenable. 113 billion barrels of quality crude. At today's prices, we're talking about $6 or $7 trillion. The biggest resource grab in history. Saddam was granting concessions to Russia, China, Brazil, Italy, Malaysia, France. All those concessions no longer exist. They're gone. It's the U.S. and Great Britain, this last March, the accords that worked out. If and when they want to get all that, they get all that oil out. A lot of it is also to keep the oil off the market, to keep the oil prices up. And that was the fight. The first Gulf War with Daddy Bush, that's what the whole fight was. That Saddam wanted a larger oil quota, and he wasn't getting it. And if he did, that would bring oil prices down. That's not my conspiracy theory. That's not my lefty conspiracy theory. That was right in the goddamn New York Times business page. It just said, Iraqi oil might threaten price floors, blah, blah, blah. Oil concessions were taken away from these other countries. Okay. The Iraq War also allowed the U.S. to impose, the White House to impose record increases in the defense budget by 30–40%, depending on how you calculate that defense budget. Iraq had switched from dollars to euros as its reserved currency, that is the currency that any other country will take. It's your backup currency. Not anymore. That was a danger. That was a real danger to U.S. creditors and speculators and international dollar finance, which it's back on the dollar. One of the first things that happened is Iraq has switched back from euros to dollars. Iraq supported Palestinian liberation. Not anymore. Iraq had an entirely state-owned economy. Not anymore. Everything has been privatized or destroyed, one way or the other. Iraq was prosperous and of some influence in the Middle East. Not anymore. Iraq today is a total basket case. It's a disaster. It's worse than Haiti. It may never recover, not for the next foreseeable 1 or 2 or 3 generations. I don't know. It's just terrible what's happened. Now, this is not U.S. ignorance or confusion at work. This is not good intentions gone awry. It is deliberate, conscious reactionism and imperialism. Bush and Cheney knew what they wanted to do, and they have done it for the most part. It's true they did miscalculate. It's true they thought the insurgency would be minor, that people would, they may have even convinced themselves that people were going to throw flowers out and greet them and all that. It's true they got a politically costly war that they didn't expect to have. But that doesn't mean they didn't accomplish anything. They've accomplished quite a bit from their perspective. And the empire can lose the war, that is, go home after it's destroyed the country. That's what happened in Vietnam. I don't think they lost the war in Vietnam. Vietnam never really recovered. It now has to take a capital road. I was in Vietnam 2 years ago, and they're telling me that the third generation is suffering from more birth deformities than ever, as the recessive genes combine from all the Agent Orange that went in there, and you can see. I've seen photographs of monster births that you don't ever want to see. You just don't ever want to see, and these kids are alive too. Do those who put forth the lies of empire believe what they tell us? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. You know, that an opinion serves my self-interest doesn't mean that I embrace it hypocritically. It might mean, because it so well serves my self-interest, that what? I embrace it all the more eagerly and sincerely. I believe it.
Might be doublethink.
It seems very persuasive for the very fact that it's so serviceable. So, do these people in the White House, do they believe in the dominant paradigm? They sure do. It defines their world for them. It assures them of their self-worth. They believe, along with one of their progenitors from 2 centuries ago, Alexander Hamilton, that the country should be run by the rich and the well-born, and it should be run for the rich and the well-born. They completely believe they are deserving of their station in life. It's called Yale, Harvard, Princeton. As has been said, George Bush Sr. was born on third base, and he grew up thinking he had hit a triple. They believe that America should lead the world, and that they should lead America. And they believe the poor are the authors of their own poverty. Just listen to Barbara Bush when she holds forth on that. And the working class are a troublesome lot who need to be reined in along with the middle class, both of whom have to ratchet down their standard of living and their level of expectations a lot more, so that the people at the top can get still richer. See, there's only one thing that ruling classes have ever wanted throughout all of history, and that's everything. They want all the best lands, all the resources, all the grains, all the herds, all the gold, the silver, everything. They want all the comforts and protections of civil life, and all the amenities, and while having to pay none of the costs. They want everything. They want you to have all the burdens, and they want all the privileges. Now, do they believe the propaganda they put out in support of specific policies? Well, sometimes they do deliberately fabricate and seem to be aware of it. You know it when you catch them in inconsistencies, when they say one thing one day, another thing the next day. I mean, Alberto Don't you ever think for one moment that they don't care what you think. they don't care what you think. Oh man, that's the only thing about you that they care about, what you think. That's what they're doing. Cheney's trip to that aircraft carrier and all that stuff. Every day they're putting on a show. They're waging their propaganda war. Not in Iraq, not in Latin America. There too. Yeah, they have a U.S. Agency of Information. What is it called? Information, AID, yeah, they have that stuff. But the country, the place they target most with all their propaganda, most of the things they do are directed to the American public, because the empire feeds off that republic. So they lie and they conjure false issues to distract or flatter or frighten the people, or in some other way to win over and immobilize the public. Or sometimes when they have no choice, they have to actually make real concessions to democratic demands.